This is a complete provocation. This has nothing to do with safety. In fact, this is the exact opposite of keeping our city safe. We do not need them here, and they had no business to come here and provoke this.
Believe that this just happened to be a coincidence.
There is no way this was a coincidence. This was widely publicized that the governor and many of our other elected officials were having a press conference here to talk about redistricting, and they decided they were going to come and thumb their nose in front of the governor's face. Why would you do that? That is unbelievably disrespectful. It's a provocative act. They're talking about disorder in Los Angeles, and they are the source of the disorder in Los Angeles right now. This is just completely unacceptable. This is a administration, this is a Customs and Border Patrol that has gone amok. This absolutely has to stop.
One of the areas here that I think is very interesting is in hiring. And you had a great piece in the Wall Street Journal. Your paper reported this the other day, that tech startups are now starting to, after another change in tax laws, starting to go on a big domestic hiring blitz. This is another sort of aspect of this America First campaign, because previously I know a lot of people in the tech industry were very concerned about bringing in cheaper workers from overseas to do things, and now Americans seem to be standing to benefit. Tell us about this.
Yeah, look, I think there is, and again, you exactly as you say, James. The economic experts said that globalization was good, right? That you have free movement of goods and services, i.e., with no tariffs, with no trade restrictions. You have free movement of capital and free to move anywhere around the world. You have free movement of people, free migration. and that you couldn't break that mold, you couldn't break that that fundamental, that benefit which had been so positive for the global economy over the last 30 years. Well, again, so we're seeing actually that the United States is testing that proposition very severely. We've already talked about the effect of tariffs. You're talking here about hiring, and that's partly obviously because of the clampdown on immigration. What we've seen in the last 6 months under Donald Trump is the most aggressive clampdown on immigration that we've ever seen in the United States, at least and certainly in the last 50 years. Now, again, people said, well, if you do that, that means, the wages are going to have to rise because, that's going to push up costs. That's going to be problematic for the US economy. Well, actually, you know what? Maybe wages need to rise. Maybe one of the problems we've had in the United States for the last 30 years, as you have in Australia, is that companies have been free to hire people overseas at much lower rates to make their goods overseas, even to produce some of their services overseas, to the detriment of domestic workers. Now we're seeing, with the clampdown on immigration, with the investment in business in the United States, we are starting to see actually American companies hire American workers again. Yeah, they're going to have to pay a bit more. Perhaps they are. And yes, that might make their profit margins slimmer, and that is a challenge. But yes, it's also going to raise the living standards of many, many Americans who've seen their living standards decline because of globalization for such a long period of time.
There's all this anti-Trump hysteria out there, and I wanted to talk about another paper, not your own Wall Street Journal, but rather the New York Times, and I was amazed to see this headline published by two former National Security Council staffers. It was entitled, "We used to think the military would stand up to Trump. We were wrong." Now, Gerard, I mean, it feels a little bit like they're saying the quiet part out loud here. Like, between the lines, there's almost a sense that they would wish for that the military would not only refuse Trump's orders when it comes to doing things like police crime in D.C. or Los Angeles, but also maybe go even further. There's an idea here, a sense that in this sort of class of thinkers, that only if they win is it actually democracy, and otherwise, well, all bets are off.
Yeah, correct, James. I mean, look, in a democracy, the military is answerable and only answerable to the civilian authorities. The commander-in-chief of the United States is President Donald Trump, as it was President Joe Biden. He alone is the commander of the American military forces. And the idea that, now, of course, the military, senior experienced military leaders are free to offer advice to the president. They're free to say, Mr. President, I don't think that's a good military strategy. And he's free to say, sorry, guys, I'm doing it. In the end, the authority rests with him. And exactly, you're right, James. For the New York Times or for others to say, why isn't the military standing up to Donald Trump? I mean, this is exactly the inversion of what you're supposed to be believing in when you talk about democracy and democracy being in peril. Democracy really would be in peril if we had an elected president who believed it was right to deploy the National Guard in certain circumstances, to pursue particular military courses of action. And listening to the New York Times, senior military leaders stood up and said, well, we're not going to do that. We're going to defy the president. He's not going to get away with it. That would be the end of democracy. You would have essentially an out-of-control military. So, of course, the military is under civilian control. And, of course, it's absurd to think that the military should somehow be defying the President Trump in what he's trying to do.